How are you guys all doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Mardiege. Today is Tuesday, October 15th, and it's been going nuts in New York recently in terms of sports. You know, we had the game last night between the Bills and the Jets. The Yankees and the Mets are in the LCSs for their series as well. And just this morning, a lot more news broke over the New York Jets regarding Davante Adams being traded there, Haason Reddick reportedly being given permission to seek a trade elsewhere. Everything just went off today in New York, and we're going to go over it in today's episode. But also not only that, talking about New York, the state of New York, Buffalo also traded for Amari Cooper. That happened today. We're not going to get into that today, but we're going to explain that all and give my reaction to that tomorrow on tomorrow's show. But in today's episode, it's going to be mostly focused on the Jets, talking about their game last night and what we took away from that. The obvious Davante Adams trade now to join Aaron Rodgers with the Jets, and Haason Reddick also being given permission to seek a trade and where he could end up, and also what does that say about the Jets as well. A lot more to come on today's show. Make sure to stick around for that. And before we jump into the first segment, reminder to you guys, if you guys want to be involved in the discussions, want to share your thoughts, questions, or share any opinions you'd want to do in these live shows, there's an easy way to go about it now just by using the new Super Chat feature available to you guys, just by clicking the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel, and we rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. Don't hesitate to drop anything you'd like to say in the chat, again, by just clicking the $ at the bottom of the chat box to use the new Super Chat feature and get involved with our show. But with that out of the way now, we can start talking about the game just last night, obviously. Because there's so much news to get to, we got to start with that one, right? Obviously, just because it's the last game of Week 6. So there was a lot to take away from it, honestly. Last night on Monday Night Football, we saw the Bills execute better than the New York Jets, in my opinion. That led them to a 23-20 win over the Jets at MetLife Stadium. The Bills stop a 2-game losing streak to firmly now sit at top of the AFC East at 4-2. And then also the Jets now lose their third straight game to only be a game ahead now of the New England Patriots for last place. So they are now 2-4, while the Patriots are still 1-5. And that difference in record can't be possible, right, for the Jets, right? You're talking about Super Bowl aspirations. To be that close to the Patriots at any point this season other than Week 1 is a good indicator to show that you're not going in the right direction, obviously. No shade to the Patriots, but it's two completely different situations, right? So that's where the Jets are right now. After their loss last night, everything sort of became very, very cold. I feel like after that game, everything was very serious, everything was very dull, and you knew the importance of that game, and more so than not, it felt like the Jets let that one slip away, more so than the Bills went out there and dominated them or something like that. But in this game, we saw the debut of interim head coach Jeff Ulbrich and the new play caller on the offensive side of the ball for the Jets, Todd Downing, and I thought both of them did a very good job to pass their first test last night in terms of the performances that we saw from this offense, mainly for the New York Jets, right? If you look at the numbers and the top performers, Aaron Rodgers had more of an Aaron Rodgers-like game. He was 23 of 35, almost 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Also, Breece Hall, the biggest news for this Jets team to kind of carry on going forward, hopefully, is that he had 18 carries for 113 yards. And the last couple of games for Breece Hall, before this, he had 23 yards, 4 yards, and 54 yards before that. So very much a drastic change. Credit to Todd Downing, obviously. So that's a huge win for the Jets in that regard. And passing-wise also, Allen Lazard had a big game, 114 yards for a touchdown. Garrett Wilson, another touchdown, 107 yards as well. And then you have Brees Hall there right after those guys, but still, you know, you could have won even with two of those guys performing very well, and it's unfortunate for them to not have come away with a win at home, especially. Also, then the other side of the things, Buffalo Bills, they had a more efficient game, I would say. Josh Allen only throwing the ball 25 times, completing 19 of them for 215 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their rushing game, even though James Cook, I want to say, missed his first game of his career last night, which is remarkable. There was no James Cook, so no other guys had to step up, and boy, did they. Ray Davis had 20 carries for almost 100 yards, and Josh Allen scored the only rushing touchdown for them, while also in the passing game, they did enough, with Ray Davis having the most yards with 55, Dalton Kincaid chipping in with 6 receptions, and it was enough. It was enough to get the job done, especially with their defense as well, coming up with some big plays down the stretch as well. But looking at how this game sort of played out here for the New York Jets and how it kind of got away from them, you look at their first drive in this game, and it pretty much set the table. It kind of foreshadowed what was to come later on in this game, because in their first drive, they had it going. The running game looked great. This offense was driving on this Bills defense, but unfortunately they failed to convert a third down, and they settled for a field goal. More of that to come, obviously, in this game. While the Bills, however, they sent their own message on their offensive side of the ball by scoring a touchdown on their first drive, and they only threw it one time throughout that whole drive, really sending a message to this New York Jets team that, yeah, our running back might be down, our starting running back might be down, we might be, trying to deal with a couple injuries, but we're still going to run the ball, and I think that's what the Bills do exceptionally well. I think it showed a lot from this Bills team to how, what's the word I'm looking for? Just how they're able to just plug and play pieces, and I think that's a big indicator of how good this offense truly is. If it doesn't matter who the players are, if it's still effective, that's truly a sign of a good scheme, of good practice and execution. I was very surprised and pleasantly surprised with how well the Bills played on offense as well. Then, while they made the score 7-3, Aaron Rodgers responded with that great touchdown throw to Garrett Wilson, making the score 10-7 at that point. And what kind of created a little bit of separation in the first half was the fact that the Jets punted in back-to-back drives after they scored their touchdown, whereas the Bills responded with 2 straight touchdown drives to extend the lead to 20-10 at that point. And thankfully for the Jets, they converted another Hail Mary. I should say Aaron Rodgers converted another Hail Mary to try to snatch as much of the momentum back for them heading into halftime with that Hail Mary caught by Allen Lazard. It was an amazing play, obviously, again, by Rodgers to complete his 4th Hail Mary now, which is just insane, otherworldly, really. People say it's luck a lot of the times, but I think if you do it more than twice or 3 times even, you got to start taking luck out of it, and that's where Aaron Rodgers is. So, that's awesome to have. You're the Jets, obviously, right in your back pocket. But the second half is where I alluded to before, where settling a lot of times for the Jets really came back to bite them, because there was 3 missed field goals in the second half alone, 2 of them by the New York Jets, and the issue really started to come out to light was with the inefficiency that the Jets had on offense also, but also in the red zone, right? Once they get down there, they put together some nice drives, running the ball, and Todd Downing, his offense looking pretty well. But once you got down there, it really became a struggle, whether it be the penalties that wiped out touchdowns like the one on Tyron Smith, or allowing too many sacks to put you behind the chains at that point. Also, just miscommunications also were a big thing. We saw that on that last drive with a pass intended to Mike Evans, but obviously it was off. So at that point, the Jets really couldn't get anything going from that point on, other than just maybe one other touchdown. But still, the Bills hit a field goal with about 3.5 minutes left, and that was pretty much the separation there that the Bills needed to hold on to that win. And obviously in the last drive, there was another holding call that the Jets put themselves back a couple steps on offense, and Rodgers had to almost throw up a prayer, and it was intercepted by Teron Johnson, if I'm not mistaken, intended for Mike Will. And it was another crushing loss, obviously, for the Jets. It was disappointing for them because if you look at a big picture compared to last year where, the only thing missing was the quarterback, after 6 weeks last year, their record was better at 3-3, and they had scored the same amount of points, which, again, looking at it side by side, is a bad sign. So it's bad and good also because I feel like they got the result they wanted from changing the play caller, obviously, because the running game looked very good. And the coaching change, played out as well as it did. But to me, the biggest takeaway I take from this Jets team is that the actual players, I feel like, have to take more accountability or have to take more of the blame when it comes to the shortcomings of this team, right? Robert Saleh's not there anymore to scapegoat him. Nathaniel Hackett isn't calling the plays anymore to put the blame on him. And now yesterday we still saw some of the same, unprofessional mistakes with the amount of penalties. Of course, some of those were on the refs, I think, doing a little bit too much. But still, there was still a lot of sacks, too much for my liking on Aaron Rodgers. The holding calls really set everything back. And on defense, they didn't start off very well. And it created that separation that the Bills needed ultimately to win this game. So I think now, with these changes now, and obviously we're going to talk about the Davante Adams trade, this Jets team is starting to run out of excuses now where the only way you could look at it is the players themselves, right, and how much blame they take in. And maybe Aaron Rodgers specifically as well. That's for you guys to decide. But it got better in terms of performance, but obviously you need the win now. And sitting at 2-4 for this Jets team is where we get our next segment that we're going to talk about, right? They fully reached the point where, everything was thrown out the window, caution was out the window, and they went out and finalized the trade for Davante Adams, right? Sitting at 2-4, nothing else matters but wins now, evidently, for the New York Jets. So they traded for Davante Adams, and we're going to talk about it. The news broke this morning, so I'll provide you guys all the information and my thoughts on it coming up in this next segment. We'll be right back after this break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit, that crown get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We're back here now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast to get to the biggest news, undoubtedly, of the day for the New York Jets and really just the entire NFL. The New York Jets trading for Davante Adams this morning. The news broke this morning after a 23-20 loss to Buffalo this morning. If it's enough, we're hitting the red panic button, and everything that we can do to improve this team is going to be, now going to be executed, right? We're going to go through and have all these options and have all of them available to us to now go fully invest into going all in on this season, right? Let's go out and get Davante Adams, and really now, there's no excuses anymore for this Jets team. They don't care about anything else other than getting wins because of how much they've invested into this team, into this season alone. So they went out and got Davante Adams, and reportedly, the Jets are sending the Raiders a conditional third-round draft pick that could become a second-round draft pick if either Davante Adams is named to the first or second team AP All-Pro team at the end of the year, or if he's on the active roster for a potential AFC Conference Championship game or a Super Bowl. Either one of those things happen, and this third-round pick for the Raiders turns into a second-round pick, which obviously is the desired outcome. How likely is it? Probably not that much, but it is the terms of the trade. So that is what the situation is right now. Those are all the terms and agreements of it right now. So yeah, the speculation over the obvious potential trade finally happens to reunite Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers are finally now reunited to help this Jets offense, which, like I just finished saying in the last segment, right, that it did get better with the coaching changes and the play calling changes, but you need that win. You need to start racking up these wins, especially, again, with the amount of expectations that are placed on Aaron Rodgers and obviously now Davante Adams, who is included into this entire fold for the New York Jets. So it's important to also realize and to take into account for anybody wondering about the contract and the financial side of things. Before this latest update by Adam Schefter that I will get to, it was agreed upon by the Raiders and the Jets that the Jets will be taking in all of Davante Adams' contract. That was a reported speculation of whether or not, teams were willing to trade for Davante Adams, knowing that they would have to essentially take in all of his contracts. Some teams wanted the Raiders to pay off some of it, but the Raiders weren't going to do that. And like I said, desperate times call for desperate measures for the Jets. So they decided, forget about the contracts, forget about everything. We'll take it all in. Just give us Davante Adams. And that's what they're doing now with his salary cap hit from the Jets. That's all going to be on their salary cap, on the Jets salary cap. And now Las Vegas will have a $15.7 million dead cap hit in 2025 instead of taking in Davante Adams' $44.1 million salary cap hit. So that's a big difference there, and one that they felt was worth taking to just get Davante Adams out of there. Not that they wanted him to leave, obviously, but with Davante requesting a trade and whatnot, it was definitely something that helped convince them ultimately going forward. And the Jets will pick up the remaining $11.59 million of Davante Adams' salary in 2024. But the update now with the new restructuring of Davante Adams' deal, according to Adam Schefter, stated that now Davante Adams and the Jets have restructured his contract to lower his salary cap number to $3.21 million this year, with 2 voided years added onto that towards the end of this deal. And the Jets and Adams will discuss Adams' future after the season and what they're going to do long term. But that the new salary cap hit is 3.21 instead of that $12 million. Like I said, it's not a pay cut. It's just been converted over to a signing bonus or something like that for Davante Adams. So it's not going against their cap, but it's not just like going up in the air, right? It's still going to Davante Adams, but through some gymnastics, obviously the Jets can kind of avoid that being on their salary cap. So that's important also to mention, and what was a big point of emphasis throughout this entire trade process for Davante Adams. But now to get my thoughts on it, once Davante Adams requested this trade, it was always going to be the 1A option, be the New York Jets, obviously, with the amount of players that they have, talented players that they have, like Garrett Wilson, obviously, Brees, Alan Lazard, who's familiar with Adams, obviously, from their time in Green Bay. Rodgers goes without saying. Nathaniel Hackett's there, obviously, still. On defense, great players. Quincy Williams, C.J. Mosley, Sauce Gardner, all the guys they have available to them. This one was always the most appetizing to me. If I was Davante Adams, this is where I'd want to go, especially with the quarterback that I've had the most success with. And it was too obvious. It was too obvious not to happen. And I don't have a problem with the trade, but I know the Steelers were rumored, and I never really convinced myself to think that the Steelers were going to trade for Davante Adams. It was never something that fit what they ever did. that being the Steelers. But, the timing of this, they couldn't have waited like 1 week or something to not play the Steelers potentially the first week that Davante is potentially going to be there in Pittsburgh. The timing of it sucks. Really, that's how I feel about it. But it's how the circumstances, sort of played out, right? Because if the Jets win last night, who's to say that maybe they hold it off a couple of weeks or hold it off maybe one more week if they're sitting right now at 3-3, maybe they're feeling better, right? Because Todd Downing called a good game. Jeff Ulbrich got his first win as the interim coach. Maybe they're just going thinking, we're fine right now. We don't need to throw all caution to the wind and go after Davante Adams, right? But because of the loss and the way that they lost, especially with how bad they were in the red zone, every second thought, any hesitation went out the window, and they just went out and completed the deal. And to show you how close this was, obviously, Davante Adams was there this morning. I think he flew in like last night during or after the game. I don't know specifically when, but he was already there this morning, right? This was already initially going to happen, I guess it seems like, and I think just the loss especially helped, facilitate this and get it over the line evidently for the Jets. So this is obviously going to help their red zone, like I mentioned. That's their biggest thing, because now with Todd Downing, I feel like they've got more of an identity of how to move the ball, what they want to prioritize in terms of the running game. I think last night was a great example for them to show them how Brees really makes everything easier for everyone when he's involved, when he's getting touches in the run and passing game. And it showed. It only really kind of crumbled on itself was in the red zone, where maybe Brees isn't able to run one in. You have those penalties that obviously don't help, and that's more so on the players. But seeing how Todd Downing facilitated and orchestrated this offense now in this new way of play calling compared to Nathaniel Hackett, I think that's encouraging now. But getting it over the line is always a lot harder than it seems. And these two guys, Adams and Rodgers, did it better than almost everybody during their prime years in Green Bay, from I think it was like 2018 to 2021 or something like that. But this obviously makes that easier. Their offense now looks like an ultimate team that you have on Madden, which is it always feels like it's too good to be true, but I guess evidently not, with the Jets just fully investing in this team now. And it's great on paper, right? But it really just leaves no excuses now for this Jets team, for Aaron Rodgers, where when the shortcomings do come, when they're probably going to lose a couple more games maybe, there's nobody else to look at other than Rodgers, other than Joe Douglas. You could also say Woody Johnson, the ambassador as well. The higher-ups who are looked at as having the most power, there's nowhere else to scapegoat. There's nowhere else to run other than just looking directly at them, right? Because you're pretty much doing everything now to cross off all the options, to not have any more what-if scenarios, right? And that's great, like I said, but I just have some hesitations on how drastic everything's been put together and how, sporadic everything's been for the Jets, right? 1 week, just last week, we fire Robert Saleh, we promote Jeff Ulbrich, we make the change over to Todd Downing, and now we're bringing in Davante Adams. So it's all exciting because it's all fast-paced. We're seeing some breaking news from the Jets that they're changing something else on their team. And not only that, with this Davante Adams deal, it looks like they're shopping Mike Williams now, who they just brought in this offseason. It looks like they're trying to offload him now. And it's just a lot. It's just a lot to really make me feel 100% confident in them, because I don't think having Davante Adams necessarily obviously blocks better for Aaron Rodgers. How do you share the ball now with Brees, Davante, and Garrett as well, making sure everyone's content with their share, and also having Davante, having Garrett, those two guys are going to be nightmares for defenses. But how much do you still remember to incorporate Brees? Do you do that too much, and now the wide receivers aren't technically or necessarily happy, I should say? All those things I just have my doubts about. And we'll have to see it play out. The first test is going to be against the Steelers, which will be interesting on Sunday Night Football. But the trade obviously goes down now and takes control of all the news going around the NFL nowadays. So it's exciting. It was obvious that it was going to happen with Davante asking for a trade, but now comes the hard part, right? There's no more alternate solutions to this. You have everything now. You have all your pieces, and if you fail now still, it's going to be looked at as, I think, one of the biggest failed projects just recently in the NFL in recent memory. And how it affects legacies and all of that, I don't really get into that just based off of this short-term, big impact project, but for Joe Douglas, for Aaron Rodgers. But we won't get into legacy talks or anything like that because we have some more things to talk about on the Jets, right? With all these transactions going on, don't overlook the fact that Haason Reddick is still technically a Jet, but not for much longer, it appears like, because the Jets have given him permission to seek a trade over the next few weeks to try and figure something out and move him after they just acquired him this offseason. So we're going to talk about that. What does it mean for the Jets? How does it make them look? And where could Haason Reddick now potentially end up after being on the Jets, but not really? So we're going to talk about that when we return after our next break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Back here now, jumping back into the action on the Chip Shot Football Podcast to continue our mini-series on today's episode on the New York Jets, and talking about now another transaction that hasn't been done but could be done over the next couple weeks, next couple days, regarding Haason Reddick and the Jets, right? It's been a crazy morning, crazy day overall for the Jets with Davante Adams being traded there. We can't overlook the fact that this is a pretty big development in this saga, right? Good or bad, determining on how you view it for the Jets, but still, it's a big development because the Jets have reportedly given Haason Reddick the permission to seek a trade now after really months that he has technically been on the team but has not been taking part in anything whatsoever for this Jets team, right? You think back to April 1st when the trade finalizes and he comes over from the Philadelphia Eagles, initially knowing that the Eagles were trading him because they weren't going to be able to agree to a new contract with Haason Reddick, so they were looking to trade him. Knowing that as the Jets, knowing that that was going to be a major hurdle to get over, you still traded for him back in April, and he didn't show up to the voluntary stuff, he didn't show up to the mandatory stuff, he missed out on training camp, and now he's missed all 6 games and has been fined millions of dollars, but it doesn't matter to Haason Reddick, obviously, because he wants a new deal. He feels that he has outplayed the current terms of his contract right now, and the Jets and his representatives have obviously not been able to come to any sort of agreement up until now, and this sudden change of heart apparently is directly the opposite of what we were getting from General Manager Joe Douglas back during preseason when Haason Reddick requested another trade away from the New York Jets this time, and Joe Douglas said that they weren't entertaining anything related to that at that point, right? They said that they were going to wait for Haason to see how long this goes out, and they weren't even thinking about a trade at that point in time. So something obviously changed from preseason, obviously, to now. And what else sort of developed over the last few days with Hassan Reddick was that his agency dropped him, basically. The CAA dropped Hassan Reddick from their agency, so he had to go out and look for some new agents, and he went out and hired Drew Rosenhaus and Ryer Matha this past Monday, and according to reports, Drew Rosenhaus was at MetLife last night to speak to the New York Jets about this issue, about resolving this as quickly as possible. And obviously, now that it has been, announced that the Jets are giving him permission to seek a trade, that meeting probably didn't go so well for any sort of compromise between the Jets and Hassan. So now we get to this point, right? And Hassan Reddick looks like his holdout is going to be finalizing over the next couple of days when and if he gets traded to a new team. And obviously now the meeting didn't go as planned. So this morning, the Athletic's Diana Rossini reported that Hassan Reddick has a short window, according to her, to find a trade partner, probably before the trade deadline on November 5th, to find another team that will hopefully now give him that contract that he's looking for, and also agree to the terms that the Jets would want in return for a player that has given them a lot of trouble, and that I forget what they traded for him, but to look for some equitable compensation for him for all the trouble I'm sure that he's caused them, and also to just offload a player like the capability of Hassan Reddick. So that's always going to be important, and I'm really interested to see what other teams are trying to acquire Hassan Reddick now. And on that point, Diana Rossini also said that Drew Rosenhaus, obviously his new agent, has been reaching out to teams over the last 12 hours to try and gauge some interest to see who would really be willing to trade with the Jets right now and acquire Hassan Reddick. And a quick pause in this segment, the Texans reportedly are trading running back Cam Akers back to the Minnesota Vikings, swapping late round picks. So that news just came in. The trades have been going crazy today. That's just another one for Cam Akers going back to the Minnesota Vikings. But anyway, back to this news on Hassan Reddick. What teams now would be ideal candidates to try and acquire Hassan Reddick, right? Because in his heyday, and it makes it sound like I'm talking about like 5 or like 7 years ago, it was like 2022, 2021, where Hassan was brought over to the Eagles, and he was a real force to that team that made it to the Super Bowl. And, things didn't go according to plan in 2023, obviously, for no one on that Eagles team. But still, you'd like to think that Hassan has a lot to offer now, obviously. He's just looking for more compensation for his services. And now that the trade deadline is on November 5th, some teams that came to my mind, and let me know what you guys think of it on some of these options, or maybe you guys can give me one that I haven't thought of. But right away, with the developments of this past Sunday in that Cowboys-Lions game, Aiden Hutchinson goes down. So what's stopping the Lions from calling the Jets up, asking, what's it going to take for Hassan Reddick to come in and be a direct replacement for a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, and maybe on a long-term deal? That partnership looks very appetizing for years to come at least. So that's at the top. Also, reuniting with his former team in the Arizona Cardinals. They need all the help they can get on defense for sure. Another team, the Chicago Bears, interests me, with them being 4-2. Their defense playing very well, regardless of only really having Montez Sweat on the pass rushing side of things to really get after the quarterback. They were in on, I'm forgetting the name. I know they were in on, Matthew Judon. It was reported they were in on trying to get Matthew Judon over to Chicago, but obviously he went to the Falcons. So this is another opportunity now for Chicago to try and get a top pass rusher to add to that defensive front. And along those lines, the Indianapolis Colts, they're dealing with a lot of injuries themselves. Their Ebukam, one of their top pass rushers, he's out the entire year. DeForest Buckner has been out. He has been on IR. So that's another team that desperately needs some pass rushing help on top of their rookie, Laiatu Latu, is an ideal spot, I would think. The Falcons, it can't hurt to add to Matthew Judon and Grady Jarrett, to have Hassan Reddick on the other side. why not have all three of them there? And the Buccaneers also, with Yaya Diaby really being their true reliable pass rusher, why not go out and get a Hassan Reddick and really solidify that defense that is getting healthier with Antoine Winfield back now. You saw the immediate impact he made this past weekend. I think he returned a fumble like 50 yards or something like that. So that's something. Kalijah Cansey's coming back for them. Vita Vea is an absolute menace for them. Adding Hassan Reddick is not too shabby of an idea, in my opinion. So I think any of those teams, Hassan would be very, very good on. Obviously, bearing that he is still the same player, why wouldn't he be? But those are the teams that I really thought of right off of the top of my head, and it's going back to now to the Jets, right? And what does this say about the Jets? I guess it's good that they finally came to realization that this just wasn't going to work. It goes back to the deception or the misleading, if you will, all offseason that Hassan was going to show up to training camp, or he was going to show up to this part, but he was elsewhere on vacation or training by himself. And then we got to preseason and the start of the season as well. Is he really going to hold out? He did. He followed through with that. And I just felt like dragging on all offseason, and once we got to the preseason, I'm pretty sure I said by the preseason or by the start of the season that if he wasn't there, I would have given him permission to seek a trade at the beginning of the season. I wouldn't have even held out for too much longer. And of course, the injury to Jermaine Johnson was a big issue that they would have liked to have Hassan Reddick there to kind of replenish that, but still, he was holding out, and it didn't look like it was going to get any better. So now it's good that they have come to this realization, but I don't like it, again, that it adds to the sporadicness, the suddenness, the impulsiveness of the Jets recently, right? There's a lot of moving parts surrounding this team. They're trying to clear out some of the players that they don't want in Hassan and Mike Williams now, apparently, and they're bringing in Davante Adams now. They're changing coaches here or there, and it just feels like it's all too much to kind of keep track of, and I don't know how you focus all that in now to just trying to play football and getting wins against other teams that have obviously, for some of the better teams, been winning for a couple weeks now, and for you to come in with all these new changes, it feels like it's a lot, at least in my estimation of this situation. So it's not like I don't believe in them. They're too talented not to. Almost the same thing with the Eagles, but it just feels like with this team now, the expectations are there, so you can kind of justify these moves, but how it all looks come December or January, where they could very much implode on themselves if they aren't winning, if they are still around 500, and say they missed the playoffs, all these moves we're going to look back on and realize that it was just too much. And that's kind of the prediction I'm giving out for a worst case scenario, but it is justifiable a little bit just based on the idea that you lay in the bed you made, right? This is the bed that they've made for themselves, so why not go out and try and do your best to make it all work out? And if it doesn't, it's going to look bad, but at least you tried to make it all work out. So now, I guess, is the fun part where we have to just wait and see how this all plays out. And it's going to start this upcoming Sunday night when they play the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously still with no Hassan Reddick, but Davante Adams should play, I'm assuming, but this is the last of the updates I'll give on the New York Jets in terms of transactions to and away from their team. And moving on to the next segment now, we're going to recap one more game that we had over the weekend that I had to talk about, being the Eagles and the Cleveland Browns. So the Eagles got a win, but it was the actions by their head coach Nick Sirianni, their play on the field, that has still left a bad, awkward taste in our mouths after that win. So we're going to talk about that, talk about what we saw from the Eagles, good and bad, and also just touch on the Cleveland Browns to talk about some things that we haven't already said, I guess, about the Browns. So that is coming up right after this short break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are back now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to discuss our last recap game of this past week 6 in the NFL, talking about the Eagles and the Cleveland Browns. So the return of A.J. Brown, obviously, and the return of Davante Smith. Coming back to the Eagles after their bye week certainly helped to help replenish this team, kind of refocus this Eagles team, and now they started off none better than with a win, 20-16 over the Cleveland Browns. Now the Eagles go to 3-2, and the Browns unfortunately go through another game where they failed to reach 20 points in a game. They're the only team in the NFL to not score 20 points yet, and the Browns also dropped to 1-5 on the season. And I mentioned a little bit before we went into the break how, there's not too much more to say about the Browns, so we're not going to talk too much about them, but more so about the Eagles. And both of their wide receivers, came back and immediately made a difference in this game with the touchdowns by each of them to help, create that difference on the scoreboard and also on the field of play, noticing a much more, dangerous just in terms of the idea, because it wasn't necessarily clean by any means that this Eagles team performed to their peak performance. I'm sure there was still a lot to be decided with this team, and with how rough it looked for the Eagles defense, Cleveland's offense also continued to struggle, and their only touchdown came from a blocked field goal attempt. So, who's to say that if the Eagles play a different, more offensive capable, competent team, maybe they struggle a little bit more, but obviously, those are all hypotheticals, and they get this win. A win's a win, regardless, in my book, in the NFL. They're not easy to come by, obviously, no matter how well or bad you're playing. So we'll take the win, but looking at how the Eagles performed first in this game, you had Jalen Hurts finish with a turnover-free game for the first time in a while. So that was good to see for Jalen Hurts, who was 16 of 25 on the day, 264 yards and 2 touchdowns, one to A.J. Brown and one to Davante Smith. Their rushing game individually wasn't really there. Saquon had the most yards at 47, but overall they had 118 with Jalen Hurts chipping in, with Kenneth Gainwell chipping in. So that's good to see as a whole, but it wasn't a typical Saquon game, if you will. And those receivers, like I mentioned, definitely stood out right from the get-go. A.J. Brown jumping off of the stat sheet with 6 receptions, 116 yards, and a touchdown. Davante Smith, only 3 receptions, but 64 yards, also another touchdown. And Grant Calcaterra stepping up for the injured Dallas Goedert with 4 receptions for 67 yards. And it only mustered up to 20 points, but this Eagles offense is still very much a work in progress. And on the other side, pretty much the same lackluster numbers for the Browns. Deshaun, no turnovers, which was pretty remarkable considering there were some plays that definitely should have been intercepted, but somehow they weren't. Deshaun finished 16 of 23, no touchdowns, no interceptions, 168 yards. The running game, only 100 total yards between between 4 guys, 100 yards between the 4 of them. The highest rusher was Pierre Strong with 43 rushing yards, and their wide receivers, not too much to write home about. David Njoku had the most receptions with 5, but only 31 yards, and Amari Cooper, playing his last game for the Browns, had 4 receptions and 42 yards. After today, he was traded to the Buffalo Bills. We're going to talk about that more tomorrow, but Yeah. Just quickly here on the Browns, with them trading Amari Cooper, it's pretty much writing off the fact that this season, or it is just signing off, I should have said, that this season is pretty much a lost cause, right? For how much Kevin Stefanski says that Deshaun gives them their best chance of winning, that Deshaun is still their quarterback, I really don't like that, because obviously you say that, and then in the next breath, obviously, you're trading away your best receiver, which, like, how is that going to help Deshaun, and how is Deshaun going to make this team any better now that their number one wide receiver is gone, right? But we're going to talk about that more tomorrow, right? Just to stick on the Eagles here a little bit more. Looking at how the game played out, there wasn't too many highlight plays that jump out at you, because to start the game, there was 4 straight punts to start this game, obviously, and Philadelphia continued to not have scored a single point in the first quarter again. They're one of, if not the only team to not have scored one single point so far this year in the NFL in the first quarter. So that's obviously still an insane problem to have for how talented this team is. But also, Philadelphia was first on the board through a field goal, and then quickly after that, after the Browns punted again, the Eagles scored the first touchdown of the game to A.J. Brown to make it 10-0. And very fortunately for the Cleveland Browns to not only get a field goal on their last offensive possession, but also to have that crazy blocked field goal for the Eagles' last possession, seemingly, in the first half. They blocked it, they returned that for a touchdown, and then all of a sudden, it's 10-10. And you're really worrying, I'm sure, if you're an Eagles team, right? Because the defense is playing well enough to hold this team to 0 touchdowns in the first half, but still the score is tied 10-10. So I'm sure Lincoln Financial was a little bit nervous. All the fans there were a little bit nervous of how this could be happening, right? That the Browns, with how bad they've played this year, that it's still 10-10 at halftime. But it really started to become a clearer picture when the Eagles edged out the Browns in the second half because of that touchdown, really, to Davante Smith and another field goal, while the Cleveland Browns couldn't execute well enough to score all but a couple more field goals, and then that was it. And the score finished 20-16 after that. So, it was low-scoring, ugly game. If you haven't watched any Steelers games, any Eagles games, you wouldn't be used to it, but me, having watched all these Steelers games, that's kind of become the norm now with that team. So these kind of games don't really bore me to death, just as much as really seeing how clear some of the faults are with these teams playing these type of games. And what I would say about this game, whether or not I was more impressed or disappointed with just both teams so far, I will say that I was impressed with how much A.J. Brown and Davante Smith really mean to this team. And, of course, I know how great A.J. Brown is, right, and how underrated Davante Smith is. But, you don't really see how much they mean to a team, clearly, until you watch and until you see teams or you see games like this where if it's not for that touchdown to A.J. Brown, or if it's not for that touchdown to Davante Smith, and you look at those being the only touchdowns, do the Eagles get up to 20 points, or is somebody else stepping up potentially? Is Saquon having a better game, or do they, last case scenario, do they potentially lose this game because they don't have these two guys? Those are, I don't think that's too crazy to say, just because still, even through these touchdowns and then having an okay game, it still didn't really look dominant in any way, shape, or form where the Browns are pretty much out of it by halftime. That Browns game against the Commanders game, that's the type of domination you'd expect to see from the Eagles, I would say, just based on the talent that they have, but it never really felt like that. And Lane Johnson had the quote of the week, of the last couple weeks, where he said that this Eagles offense is just constipated, which it epitomizes everything that this offense truly is, for a lack of better terms. So that's where the Eagles stand right now. I'm impressed with how much AJ and Davante Smith really mean, and just highlighting their talents overall individually. But I am just, again, still disappointed overall on what I saw from the Eagles offense. I guess just because I want to see Saquon really be the focal point of this team. I want to see him have the stat line after each and every game, or after every other game. And I know people will say that, they game plan for Saquon or they try to take him away. But if that's going to be the case, then you need to perform a little bit better on the offensive side of the ball when you're passing it all these times. And if that's not working, then, something's not connecting, where they're taking away Saquon and you have these two great weapons and you're not creating what I believe to be more of a separation, because the Eagles are that good talent-wise. So I was disappointed to see the result be as close as it was, and the Browns, we'll touch on them more a little bit tomorrow, but there's not much more to say after repeating the same verbiage each and every week on how Deshaun and this offense isn't really going to go anywhere. For them to still throw out the same product and expect something different, you can only really criticize it so much before you need to wait for a change for something to happen before you get back to it. So we'll talk about that more tomorrow, and Nick Chubb's return and Amari Cooper not being on the team anymore. What does it mean for them? But what I did want to mention was Nick Sirianni. Did you guys see him talking trash to the Eagles fans after the game? And, it's just more of like awkward, just unnecessary, just like uncomfortable actions by Nick Sirianni. And it's not like the first time this has happened. We've talked about how there was that moment in the Super Bowl where he was celebrating a call that he thought was going to go their way, and Jalen Hurts kind of like put his hand down and told him to like stop, almost like he was embarrassed. We've seen him like taunt the Chiefs fans after they won a game there. I want to say last year or the year before that, and that's another moment. And then I don't know, it's the way he kind of comes across, how he communicates some of his messages, some of his press conferences are just, it rubs you the wrong way. At least it rubs me the wrong way on how he presents himself, and it's just not the image I think you want this team to have, specifically with all the troubles that they're having on offense, with all the criticism they might get at Jalen Hurts or things like that. For the head coach to be acting this way, it's the last thing you want, but it almost kind of points to the main issue with this team, is that they have, Nick Sirianni leading them, having him be the image that is presented for the Philadelphia Eagles each and every week, the guy that talks to the media each and every week, the guy that talks about this team and how he's going to lead this team. And to have that sort of immature, just, again, awkward and weird behavior towards his own fans, it's not the kind of leader that you would want for a team. And I guess that points to the main problem with this team, really. But, I just had to bring it up because I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen any coach kind of talk to his own fans like that. And we know that the Philadelphia fandom is very, clear-cut, very, stern in what they want and how they see things going. And if you can't handle that, then I think it just proves another reason that Nick Sirianni maybe isn't cut out for this job for all sakes and purposes. So I just thought I'd bring it up here lastly, because it really was an odd sight to see. And, it's something that we're going to have to talk about and I'm sure address later on, but a little bit also in this next segment, where we're going to close out today's show and talk about some of the coaches that I think are and will continue to be on the hot seat going forward for the rest of the season in the NFL. After 6 weeks that we've had a good look at these teams, which coaches are at most risk of losing their jobs at certain points of this season. I'll give you guys my picks for the coaches on the hot seats and how close they are to losing their jobs, potentially, if things continue to play out as badly as they have seen so far. So we'll be back with that topic right after this quick break. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show, and we're going to bring up a topic that not a lot of coaches, not a lot of teams want to be on the receiving end of, but we have to talk about it, I believe, because we're 6 weeks through the NFL season, and I believe that it's fair now to point out some of the teams, some of the environments that are heading towards a change that aren't really sitting too well with me based on the performances and what we're hearing from those teams and the reports around those teams. And I just feel like we got a good sample size now that we could kind of evaluate which ones are heading towards a drastic change or a more drawn out change towards the end of the season potentially based on how everything plays out. And we're looking at the top and we're looking at some of the top places with head coaches on the hot seats and looking at it at sort of a three-piece scale, if you will. You know, in terms of the hot seat, which coaches are on the warm seat, I guess you could say, the hot seat and the scolding seat right now after 6 weeks in the NFL. I have a list here of about 5 coaches that I think are the closest to potentially being sacked in soccer terms, if you will. So I thought I'd bring it up because some of these situations I think are heading in a bad direction where you can't really ignore them up until this point. So starting off with the first one, on the warm seat, I have Antonio Pierce as one of the main candidates, I guess you could say, to potentially be let go of, or for the Raiders to seek a change at some point this year, because of the fact that the Raiders are 2-4 right now. It hasn't been like awful, but in the same breath, you know, the situation overall with the Raiders hasn't really improved too much. The indecisiveness with the quarterbacks, right? Is it Gardner? Is it Aiden O'Connell? How long is it going to be Aiden O'Connell? Also the fact that they missed out on drafting one of the 6 that went right before their pick in the NFL draft, so that really didn't help anybody too much. And also the inconsistency, not just at quarterback, but overall on this team, where they beat the Ravens, but they get blown out by the Broncos. Now, they don't look too much better against the Steelers. They have a decent win against the Browns. So we have a couple good ones and some more bad ones. You don't really know how to judge this team too much, and you don't really know what team is going to show up on Sundays, especially. And with the fact that they just traded Davante Adams, how does that affect their overall, you know, confidence that the fans, that this organization has on this group of players, that they're really able to do something this year? And, you know, the story of Antonio Pierce, I don't want to see him leave, but I feel like it's almost inevitable to a point where you came in last year, you really galvanized the troops to really turn this thing around after the whole Josh McDaniels situation and how awful that ended. For him to come in and really turn things around like he did was great to see. It was a great story last year, but now this year and how things haven't really changed too much, that's why I really didn't put him on the scolding seat per se, because it's not imminent by any means, but he could be looked upon as a guy that the Raiders, if this thing doesn't really get any better, how they'll really try to go through a clean slate of everything and reset everything completely now, knowing that Davante's gone. Maybe they entertain a trade for Max Crosby if they really want to blow this thing up. But Antonio Pierce could be at the feet of that if they decide to really change everything completely. So I had him on the warm seat. I had him on the warm seat right now. For not too bad, not the hot seat, but just, you know, consider it. It wouldn't surprise me, so to say. The next coach I wanted to mention is Doug Peterson, and he is the only coach I have on the scolding seat. He's the one that I feel like is the closest to being potentially fired in layman's terms, right? The Jaguars are 1-5 now after another display just being dominated by the Chicago Bears. They didn't play great against the Buffalo Bills. They were fortunate to come away with a win against the Colts, and it just really hasn't looked convincing at all this year, especially with big expectations, right? With Trevor Lawrence being signed to the most money by a quarterback before Dak Prescott, obviously. And the pressure that their owner, Shad Khan, was putting on this team as well, and how he was saying that this was one of the best Jaguars teams that was present in recent memory, and how they wanted to really erase and not have the ending of 2023 be a narrative that continues on with this team going forward. And they've only really gotten worse or just continued that trend, because they collapsed last year, losing the majority of their second half games, and now they've lost the majority of their first half games so far through 2024. So unfortunately, they're not going to get rid of Trevor Lawrence, right? Because they just signed him to that massive contract. So with Doug Peterson being there, and with how bad it's going so far, and you're hearing talks about after the game against the Bears, how Andrew Sisko, their safety, was saying how there's a lot of quit in this team, and how Doug Peterson himself said that they need to change the culture. At this point is kind of crazy to think about, where you're talking about changing the culture, and the culture is one of the things that is most solidified in some of the better teams. So if you're talking about that, then I don't think we're having the same discussion as we would with a contending team compared to the Jaguars. So if the losing continues heading towards the trade deadline, it wouldn't surprise me if they just packed everything up and decided that, it's not the year for it. Doug Peterson really isn't getting the best out of Trevor Lawrence and developing the way that we thought he would. So it wouldn't surprise me that he's the next coach gone after Robert Saleh was obviously fired. So he is on the scalding seat for me at this point of the year. Also, the next coach that I wanted to mention here also is Nick Sirianni. And there's not a lot of coaches that after a win you would say are on the hot seat, but I think Nick Sirianni has been here for a while, even if not a lot of people wanted to bring it up. I think certainly this is a situation where, like we finished just saying, that Nick Sirianni just really hasn't, apart from that Super Bowl year, and I don't want to downplay like everybody just gets there, but the drop-off has really been so confusing and really just been unacceptable with how much talent that they have, how slow they start games now. And I know he doesn't really have direct responsibilities anymore, but that goes along with it, right? If your head coach really isn't involved in anything, then what is he really doing? You might say, oh, he's motivating or he's leading, but after the displays he shows with talking trash and talking back to his own fans and doing the stuff that he has done in the past before, is that the guy that you want to kind of show face for your organization and be a representative for this team? I think that, and the fact that if the Eagles continue to put on these bad displays where they're okay some games, they get by, but they lose some other games, and they just kind of float around 500, it's not a situation where Nick Sirianni is just guaranteed to come back. I think at that point, with how much talent that they have and how much better seemingly they got on defense, right, with these additions and things like that, it would be really disappointing if after acquiring Saquon and having this juggernaut team, it just ends in a 500 season where they get bounced out again in the first round of the playoffs. So I feel like Nick Sirianni, because there's no really other option to go to, is probably on the hot seat if things don't turn around for the Eagles. And Terrell T, welcome to the show. Cam to the Vikings. I saw that before. Cam Akers obviously going back to the Vikings. Pretty surprising. There's been a lot of trades today. And that one's just the latest one. So that one is one that I wasn't expecting, but it did happen as well today. And just rounding off some of the guys here as well, the last two, I have Mike McCarthy for the Dallas Cowboys being on the hot seat for me. And it just felt like he's overdued his stay there as the Dallas Cowboys head coach. Again, I don't know why the Cowboys sort of thought that it was a great idea to bring him back after the year that they had last year, disappointing once again in the first round of the playoffs, to bring him back and think that things were going to drastically change with the same group of guys, if not worse, with the same head coach. I don't know where they would have thought that this was going to be drastically different, but I guess you get the same results by putting in the same amount of effort in trying to improve this team. you put in the same amount of effort that you did last year or not at all this offseason to try and improve this team, you're going to get results like this. The same sort of lackluster, disappointing, Cowboys team that you think should play better, but they're missing a lot of key pieces. And if you like Mike McCarthy will be the next one to go, that's why I have him on the hot seat, not the warm seat, because he would be the next one to go. They're not going to get rid of, obviously, their general manager or anything like that. They're not going to get rid of their quarterback, their wide receiver they just signed. They just brought in, they didn't just bring in their coordinators, but that whole coaching staff could go after this year. I feel like they are going to be the next ones to go. That's why I have him on the hot seat, based on how the Cowboys are pretty much stuck in the same place they were last year, if not worse. So Mike McCarthy is there as well. And lastly, the Panthers, Dave Canales. This one is a little bit more self-explanatory just because the Panthers don't look any better. Maybe you think that Dave Canales, this position for him, he was a little bit in over his head because of how young he was. This is his first head coaching job after having a good season as the coordinator for the Buccaneers and helping develop Baker Mayfield. It hasn't really developed like that for Bryce Young. Obviously, they benched him, and it hasn't gotten any better right since then with Andy Dalton. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if the Panthers kind of reset everything again and find a new head coach, find new coordinators, try to find other pieces to just add to this team. That's sort of their MO, trying to reset everything and get the new guys in and try to, get quicker results. And I don't necessarily agree with it. I think they need a bit more continuity at this point, but with how bad they're performing, it wouldn't surprise me that he is let go of and the Panthers reset this entire thing. So those are my top 5 candidates of the coaches who are facing the most heat, who have potentially the greatest chances of being let go of this season if things don't start to turn around. We're already through the first 6 weeks of the NFL so far, and the next couple, or the next few I should say, are going to be that much more important for securing jobs, for securing seeding in the NFL overall in the playoffs as well. It's only going to get tougher. It's only going to get more exciting as well. So we have that to look forward to. But for right now, that'll do it for this episode of the Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you guys by the GSMC Sports Network. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I want to remind you guys to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. And if you want to see more of this show, check out both YouTube channels, the GSMC Podcast Network channel and the GSMC Sports Network channel, to see more content around the NFL, more of the live shows, and more content around this league in a variety of different ways. And lastly, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. for more of these live shows with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host, covering more of the NFL as we go on through the season. Join me tomorrow at the same time to continue to talk about the NFL and more storylines that continue to happen as we go through the rest of the week.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.